This is our 11th flip of the 2019 aerobic compost effort. It's as the compost turns. That's what we're up to. The 10th flip didn't have a lot of heat. Only in the largest or the deepest part of the pile did it have heat. So then we ended up adding some greens and more water. Now we're going to find out what that did. Feels hot just from kind of getting close to it. Okay. We have more wild plants that we're going to add. Some comfrey. Ooh, we got flies on it. Most of the wild plants are goldenrod. A little bit of tansy mixed with it. And I picked some real young, very young garlic mustard. Oh, it's succulent. Bacteria should like that if I can keep it moving. I don't see any heat right now, so that's not a good sign. I mean, it's not a bad sign either. That means we just start using it now. But I sure would like to get another couple flips. And we'll see what it's like in the more it's depth, where there's some depth there. Mulch in there. Let's just get some of this started and see what we got. Oh yeah, it's warm. We're just not getting a lot of steam because it's so warm out here, I think. Oh yeah, we're good. We do have green material, so that means it's not chewing it up as quick as it has been. So the last two piles, I also added a full wheelbarrow of ant tailings. I'm not gonna this one. I want to see if this thing will fire back up with the comfrey. I mean, fire up big time sort of thing. I think this is the one with the comfrey because I got some mustard. There's some mustard it's growing all over the place in the county, but I got a couple of plants in the back. I don't know if I want it to spread, so I grabbed some of it. There, this is comfrey right here. Comfrey always gets this thing fired up. So the proof is how much green material do we have in the pile itself where I really mixed a lot of it. I mixed a lot of it right here, right in the center. And the greens are pretty much gone, then we know we're still fired. I just saw a worm. That's not good. That was right at the top. Oh yeah, it's working. Okay, we're good. Looks really nice. Probably I added more water again too, so that probably helped. So I'll show you this so you can see that it's working. These were green plants, just like I have in the buckets over there. I added those last time, which was less than 2 days ago, and they're getting ate. So we're going. You know, that one is green, but that was on the outside of the pile. Just because I have it, I'm going to add some water. Cherry tree here is snowing down petals on me. That's nice. This will be a nice place for these nice succulent garlic mustards. Ooh, they look nice. My bacteria is really going to love them. I am the creator of life right here. Hey, that's the way you can be godlike. You create life. I'm sure there are people that probably take offense to that. More comfrey. The last of it, I'll show you. This is what it looks like here. This is a comfrey leaf right here. You can see it's very succulent, breaks easy, very juicy. You can probably see that in the stem. There, very juicy, and there's a lot of nitrogen in it. It's actually known as a mineral accumulator. It even accumulates some iodine, which is in short supply around here in the Great Lakes. And it grows really fast. You get a lot of green material quickly in the spring. It's even faster than goldenrod in terms of how much material it'll make right away in the beginning of the season, before summer even starts. This is the root of a tansy. It's not really breaking out yet. That's okay if it doesn't. We'll put it into our beds and let the worms finish it off. There's another one. Tansy roots, when they're older, are pretty tough. They're almost like woody species-like roots. Oh, here's a good representation of that white, what I thought was mold. Some type of anaerobe. But it's actually, I was told that it's actually an aerobic bacteria. And it comes from being a little bit warmer, and it is very warm. And being in a pile a little longer, it takes a little longer for it to exhibit these white signs. And I was told it was really good bacteria. But I was just told that. I can't verify that it is. I'm not a scientist. I'm not studying this stuff with a microscope. Since I took that PDC, permaculture design course, I'm acting on faith more than anything. Taught us how to do it, how to do this aerobic compost, and I just started doing it. I'm kind of doing a variation of what he taught. You know, he is his name is Jeff Lawton. He was my teacher. He is he's actually a British guy, but he immigrated to Australia. So what he said, or what his goal is to get it done as fast as possible. So this normal mix that he recommends, which is broken out into thirds, 1 part manure, 1 part green plants, green material, and 1 part dried material, which would be like dried straw, and chopped straw being the best. Something that's in smaller pieces. The smaller the pieces, the faster you'll get this to compost down. So his is, the way he taught it, it was geared to be done in 18 days. So you start with your original mix and you just go with that. And again, the formula is, once you build the pile, and he actually taught us to use meat, some type of meat like fish, to ignite it in the center. You put the fish, you build a little bitty pile. You're trying to do at least a 1 yard pile, but I'm doing between 2 and 3 yard piles, 3 square yards. And what you do is you build the pile up a little bit off the ground, and then you put a mix of fish, or actually any kind of meat. I've been experimenting with all kinds, and it doesn't matter. But fish really works good. And a side note on the fish, whereas this pile won't eat, you know, mammal bones, and the fish bones, they get, bacteria eats those in like 2 or 3 days. There's just no fish bones. And let's see, what was my point to make? Oh yeah, but I want to make another side point. There's another permaculture guy that's talking about putting fish in soil, and I didn't watch his video yet. He just has a title saying why I put fish under tomato plants. Well, I'll tell you, that's not a good situation. I've tried that, and what happens is, you know, 2 and 3 years later, you're digging up these fish bones yet, and man, they're sharp. They'll draw blood. Possible you get sepsis out of that, and that'll kill you. So no, you don't put fish bones directly in the soil. Compost them first like this. So anyhow, the point was, Jeff Lawton wants to get this pile done fast, and he doesn't add, he just starts with the original ingredients, and the formula is you start it in 4 days. You know, you have a catalyst in the center like I'm talking about fish, and then after you do the 4 days, the initial 4-day startup, after that you flip it every 2 days and it'll get done. So he said this, and he didn't say exactly how he does it, although I have a pretty good idea. He thinks he can, or he says he can get the pile done in 11 days. And I believe that because, and he says you got to be really careful with your ingredients. And I think what he means by that is they have to be really small. You can't use anything large, like large stems of plants. You know, it actually has to be kind of chopped up. Same thing with the manure. You can't have big balls of manure. So somehow you find the manure pieces, and then you got to take the temperature reading. You have to have a compost thermometer, and every time that pile hits 155 degrees Fahrenheit, you flip it. So that's how I think he can get it done in 11 days. He didn't tell us how on the video he was on the course. He was kind of coy about it, like he is the only guy who should know. Well, when you work with the compost like I'm doing, you can figure that stuff out. And I haven't done a pile like that. I've been thinking about it, but I haven't done one yet, because my variation of this is to try to get as much material in this as possible. For 2 reasons. probably the main reason is because I just have a lot of material. I got stuff growing everywhere on this property now. And I have a lot to add. And I want to use it. I want to have it be valuable to me. Oh, here's some comfrey left yet. I want these wild plants to have a value instead of being a detriment. And then the best reason is because all these different wild plants, and then a lot of the other ingredients that I'm adding other than plants, like the green sand and the azomite, they all put a nutrient value into the pile. And all these plants have different values. They have different types of nutrients at the same time, different amounts of these nutrients than each other. They all don't come out of the same mold. So by adding all this in, getting it all incorporated in the compost, all these nutrients are being added to my garden, and my food forest, and my forest garden, and my pawpaw patch. And I think it's all this bacteria that's living and dying and breeding and expanding. I think it's even going through the neighbors' properties. You can see the long grass next to me is really perked up since I started composting versus what it was. And I think I have so much life here that there's so much life that there's not enough food for it all even. It has to kind of go dormant. But that's not a bad thing. It means my soil is filled with humus and filled with food for my plants. Because it's the secretions of soil life that lead to live, living, nutritious soil. And that's what produces the nutritious crops that we want to grow and eat. So I don't know how much more simpler I can make it than that, right? So this is the start of the pile that from last time it wasn't very hot at all. I only had heat in one little section. So this is the part where I've been turning some of it already, where I put a lot of greens and a lot of water in to see if I could reactivate it. I think that adding the ant tailings kind of dried it out a little bit. But we're going again. This is the last of the greens. Alright. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be totally done weekend like I want it to be. So I'll get out the compost sifter. This is the compost sifter right here. So I'll do a video on that. I'll sift some of it because I want some really nice, soft, small piece material for my pots for growing potatoes. So I'll make a wheelbarrow or two full. I also got another fella, his name is Bricker. He came over last year and traded me some tomato plants for some compost. And he grew some really nice tomatoes. Holy cow, I couldn't believe it. Off that compost. Well, I could believe it because I do too. He showed some pictures and his really look nice. So he must have cared for his plants better than I do. So he wants to trade me for tomatoes for compost again this year. And I'm not talking about a lot. A couple 5-gallon bucket bowls, that's it. No, I'll do that. So, of course, I don't want to do that too much because I won't have any for myself. And I don't have to worry. There ain't many people that are interested in this around here, so at least not that I found. Yeah, the whole pile's going this time other than right on the edges. So I don't see as many honey locust seed pods as last time. So they're getting ate. I noticed one outside of the pile and it was in the pod yet, and I broke it apart and looked at the seeds and see if any more sprouting or anything. The seeds looked like they were getting ate by the bacteria even though they were still in the pods. Found that to be pretty interesting. Okay, this outside stuff we want to put on the bottom. In the beginning I do that with the whole pile, but now that everything is really moving, it doesn't seem like I really need to do it. It's not really drying out. What the heck that is? A piece of a stump. How did that get in there without me seeing it? Put it in the pawpaw in the hazelnut patch. Hazelnut thicket. We got a pawpaw patch and we have a hazelnut thicket. I see some worms here on the edges too. So they're really wanting to get at this stuff. I might have to, I'm definitely going to end it this weekend. I'm thinking about it. The worms are liking to eat it. That means we're there. Of course, they can't eat it where it's 155 degrees. I just wonder what their tolerance is in terms of heat. It can't be higher than 131. I had a lady that worked, she actually, I think, was retired. She worked for the USDA, and she knew I was composting. And she sent me a link to some scientific study. Or maybe it was a study from a university or a corporation or something, I don't know. Of course, if it comes from a corporation, you can't trust it, can you? Because they only want to make money. But the point is, at 131 degrees, bacteria is going to eat all the seeds and all the pathogens. And there's even some study out there that proves that if you have heavy metals, it'll incorporate the heavy metals or bind them in carbon and they'll be inert. So I saw another worm right there. So I'm just wondering, what can the worms tolerate? Certainly not 131, but what can they tolerate? 100? I don't know. Yeah, there was a study up in Canada where they put compost in long furrows. Now, that's not what they call them, not furrows, but you know, like this, but they're really long. And they discovered that worms even are alive and are eating when they're half frozen. They're pretty tough. Speaking of worms, there's actually a study out there now that they're talking about worms are moving north into the permafrost, and he didn't think that was very good news. Because permafrost melts and you're going to have methane releases, and although methane doesn't last in the atmosphere as long as CO2, it's more potent of a substance that's going to, the sun comes through the atmosphere, reflects off the earth, and it's about how much heat can re-escape back out into space. And methane is more of a shield than CO2, where more of it isn't allowed to escape back into space. And there's a fellow in Australia, Jensen or Jens or something his name is, and he talks about this ratio, this difference of how much energy is coming into the earth versus how much energy is allowed to release. And this kind of goes in the same vein of thought of what Mollison talks about in his PDCs, in that if we have a high ratio of difference where there's less escaping into space than what's being absorbed, then we are warming up the planet. So that ratio should be about even. And CO2 and methane both increase the amount that's being retained on the planet. One reason we haven't seen what some scientists think is the full effect of it yet is because the oceans are absorbing the extra heat. So in the permaculture world, or information, what they talk about is, forests, and then permaculture spends a lot of time on trees in terms of the science of trees and their interactions with just about everything, the water cycle, and soil life. And it's actually an intermediary between the atmosphere and the earth, and that's exactly what Mollison says. Pretty sure Lawton said that too. I haven't gone over any of the Lawton material lately, so I probably have to do that again. I really like Mollison, so I've been spending a lot of time listening to his work. But this Jens from Australia, he talks about this difference of temperature, and he actually worked out the science. If we had more forests, and I think he even had a number how many forests we have to redo, and it's a lot. We need a lot more forests, but if we had enough forests, we could bring that number back down to closer to even. And he's worked that all out. And the simple way to understand it is, forests, trees provide shade, and in a forest you have uneven surfaces and different ages of soil material and soil life. And anytime it rains, it's going to grab that water and store it and slowly release it. That's why if you have forests, you can have some pretty clean running streams. That's where the trout fishermen want to fish, where there are forests. And so you have the shade, you have the effects of storing rainwater and slowly releasing it over time. And then the forest stop the wind. You go a mile into a forest and you're hardly going to feel a breeze down on the forest floor. So the wind can dry a lot out if you don't have a forest. And once it's dry, then it starts to absorb heat. And probably the most information that this guy focuses on is the water cycle. What the forests mean to the water cycle. So when it's hot, the forest will actually transpire moisture out of their leaves and put it into the atmosphere. And actually, Mollison had a lot to talk about with that too. So did Lawton. I'm remembering as I'm talking. And that transpiration could be responsible for as much as 70% of rainfall in some areas. Because there's another factor to the forest and the trees. There's a bacteria that lives on the leaves, and that bacteria, when it's windy, actually is cast off of the leaf into the atmosphere, and that becomes the nucleus of rain. Because there's always some moisture in the air, but it's so fine that it isn't in the rain. It doesn't turn into rain. You know, it's humidity. It's not rain. And too much humidity isn't good. But this bacteria causes it to rain along with the moisture that the tree is transpiring. So what the tree is doing, you know, and it's worked this out over I don't know how many millions or billions of years. So the tree is actually creating an environment it wants to live in through the process. So back to this CO2 and methane and worms. The worms showing up in that permafrost isn't good news. And the ice has melted pretty fast up at the North Pole on the Arctic Ocean. And hopefully it doesn't go away totally, but if it does, that is our refrigerator cooling this area down. So it's going to get a lot warmer. And if the wet bulb temperature goes up over 100, we're not going to be able to live in it too well. But if you have forests, at night, forests will condense the humidity into water. So, something really wild to think about. Maybe we're all going to become night creatures if it happens. I don't know. Anyways, I got on a subject because I'm reading about methane. So, now you know too. Know a little bit anyway. Alright, thanks for watching. I'm done.